Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, we need to be paying attention because everything has changed. What am I talking about? I'm talking about how wars are fought, how warfare is conducted on the battlefield. We're seeing it right now in the current conflict in the Middle East. We've seen it in Ukraine. And we're going to see enormous changes going forward. So today we're going to talk about what's happening right now. We're going to talk about what's going to happen moving forward. And we're going to talk about how it directly relates to Bible prophecies about the end times. Because I believe, no doubt about it, it does. So let's get started. Let's first take a look at this article right here. This is from the Daily Beast. It says, how toy drones are transforming war in Ukraine and Israel. It says, looking closely at photos of the Israeli army mobilizing for a possible incursion into Gaza, 2 weeks after Hamas militants infiltrated southern Israel and killed or abducted more than 1,400 people, you might note strange cage-like metal roofs welded or bolted onto the tops of Israeli Merkava tanks. Soldiers call this add-on armor a cope cage, as it's designed to cope with a new and devastating weapon, a toy drone. It's definitely a new era, a Ukrainian military drone operator told the Daily Beast. A decade after Iraqi, Syrian, and Yemeni militant groups first weaponized quadcopter-style drones, strapping explosives to them for one-way kamikaze attacks or rigging them to drop grenades, cheap drones are now the standard aerial weapon for both the Russian and Ukrainian armies. Likewise, Hamas deployed similar drones during its October 7th attack, damaging at least 2 Merkava tanks by aiming for the weak points in the tank's top armor, the same weak points the hastily produced cope cages are made to protect. Earlier cope cages protected tanks from missiles that were designed to strike the vehicles on their roofs. Armies assumed the cages would also work against drones. There are 2 basic types of do-it-yourself drone attacks. There are quadcopters or octocopters that drop grenades and are guided by GPS or radio by an operator sitting behind a screen. There are also single-use, first-person view drones loaded up with explosives and steered via radio by an operator peering through a virtual reality headset. A typical drone might weigh just a couple of pounds and fly no farther than 20 miles at a top speed of less than 30 miles per hour. Compared to a supersonic warplane weighing 20 tons and ranging hundreds of miles, a do-it-yourself attack drone is flimsy, slow, and short-ranged. But where a fighter jet might cost $50 million, and I would also point out, and where the training for the person who's going to operate that $50 million fighter jet, that person is put in danger on the battlefield, and that's not the case for these drone operators. It says the commonly used DJI Mavic 3 FPV drone, that's first-person view drone, retails for just $2,000. Military commanders think twice before sending a fighter jet and its pilot, there we go, into harm's way. They don't have to think at all before launching a drone or a whole swarm of drones. Both sides in the Ukraine war are supplying many thousands of them per month. Samuel Bendit, a senior non-resident associate with the Center for Strategic International Studies Europe, Russia, and Eurasia program, told the Daily Beast. So we are seeing drone saturation on the battlefield like never before. And I would argue that we're going to see a greater level of saturation going forward. It says Ukrainian drone operators tend to coordinate their attacks with artillery, the newest and oldest weapons on the battlefield, working together. And we've seen this in the past. For instance, in World War I, we had horse-mounted troops and we had tanks. And especially when we look at the difference when that war started and when it ended, what weapons were being used, what tactics were being deployed. Think about at the beginning of that war, aerial bombardment was someone in a hot air balloon dropping a stick of dynamite on the troops below. By the end of the war, you had massive dogfights among pilots flying around the skies way above the battlefield. So we're seeing significant changes when you have wars like this and somebody's trying to get an edge and they're able to test these ideas on the battlefield. You find out what works and what doesn't very quickly, and it really ramps up the type of weapons that are used, and it changes the nature of warfare. And I want to take a look at this article right here that I believe will give us insight into where we are now and where we are going. This is from the End Times Bible Prophecy newsletter, October 2019. So this is 4 years ago. It's titled Next Generation Weapons and the New World Order. Because, guys, everything is going to change as a result of what we see happening now and what's next to come. So this says, in World War I, generals who studied Napoleon sent waves of troops into a barrage of machine gun fire. The rapid-fire weapons mowed down thousands in minutes. Was this necessary? No. Thousands of young men died all because their commanders focused on fighting the last war. They didn't adjust to new developments and new technologies. In World War II, the Polish army defended itself from Nazi and Soviet invaders with horse-mounted troops. They also focused on fighting the last war. A few years later, World War II ended when the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. Ever since, most people have held the belief World War III will start the same way World War II ended. So we're making the same mistakes today, guys. We're overly reliant on Cold War era type technology and thinking the nuclear deterrent will prevent an attack by a major superpower, but things are changing. It says anyone who believes this makes the same mistake as those who came before them. They prepare to fight the last war. Complacency is the enemy. Our tendency to focus on the past creates a sense of familiarity and comfort breeds complacency. What I want to address this very quickly. We've heard for weeks now. How did this happen? How did this attack on October 7th happen? How was it possible for Hamas to breach the Israeli border? How was it possible that Mossad, the greatest intelligence agency in the world, didn't know about this? How is it possible that the IDF, the greatest military in the world, possibly missed this? And so all sorts of conspiracy theories are coming forward. But I would argue that the very thought of that, the premise that says these are the greatest organizations, they're invincible, is the reason we saw that. It's what led to that. It breeded a sense of complacency where instead of having actual soldiers on the border, well, it's okay to have some cameras. These cameras will work. And it's downplaying the capabilities of your enemy and thinking they don't have the intelligence that you have. They don't have the technology you have. And so it all came to a head on October 7th based on that complacency. And we continue to see this today on the battlefield. So let's read on. It says, when it comes to warfare, complacency is the enemy. For over 70 years, mutual assured destruction prevented all-out nuclear war between the major powers. The world emerged from the Cold War intact. Following decades of uncertainty, nuclear war never came. We didn't destroy ourselves. This lulled many into a false sense of security, and complacency set in. The majority of people now think World War III is unwinnable. And guys, we know that's not the case. The Bible clearly tells us in Revelation 6 that there is another world war. The question is, will it be World War III, World War IV, V? I don't know. But we know that there is a victor in that war, and the Antichrist establishes this global empire. That's what the book of Revelation tells us. So we know that this idea that World War III will destroy all of humanity is false. That's what the Bible clearly states. The world thinks something different. But again, this gives a false, strangely, it gives people a false sense of security because they think, well, everyone knows it's unwinnable, therefore it will never begin. But that's not the case. They think possession of nuclear weapons make a nation invulnerable. Because they do, they think World War III will never happen. They're wrong. The global stability of the post-war era is coming to an end. With the exception of a few moments, such as the Cuban Missile Crisis, you have to go back to the years just before World War II to find a time when the world was more dangerous than it is right now. And keep in mind, this was written 4 years ago. See, look at all that's happened. It's more dangerous now. Why do I say that? Again, complacency. During the Gulf War in 1991, the United States displayed a dominant edge in military technology. Its armed forces were declared superior to any on the planet. Sound familiar? That's what we were just talking about with, oh, Mossad is superior to anybody on the planet. The IDF is superior to anybody on the planet. We're invulnerable. And what happened, right? So it says its armed forces were declared superior to any on the planet, but dominance doesn't last forever. The nature of war has changed. Nations now use terrorists, proxy armies, and cyber attacks to wage war anonymously. Conventional weapons can't effectively counter these types of attacks. Moreover, Russia and China have gone to great lengths to close the technology gap since the early 1990s. The result? The world power structure is on the verge of a major shift. And we're seeing that on the battlefield in Ukraine. We're seeing that on the battlefield in Israel right now. Today, the world is entering a new era in warfare. September 14th, 2019 marked the beginning. And many of you will say, what in the world happened on that day? Well, on that day, someone, either Iran or their proxies in Yemen, launched a successful drone attack on 2 oil processing facilities in Saudi Arabia. Approximately 5% of the world's daily oil consumption flowed through those 2 facilities. The news made headlines for a few days, then just as quickly as it hit the news cycle, it disappeared. Most people forgot all about it, but for many it remains a significant event. In fact, for many it's a terrifying event. Why? Because it exposed conventional defenses as inadequate. Saudi Arabia invested millions to secure its facilities, but in mere minutes, those defenses proved useless. And I would add, they proved useless against technology that did not cost millions. It cost thousands. And so you can barricade and secure a facility all you want, but it's even more vulnerable to attack today than ever before. Because of the success of this strike, expect more drone attacks. Expect smaller drones arriving in larger swarms. Why? They can inflict just as much damage as any conventional weapon, and because they're unmanned, the attacking nation can deny any involvement. So what are we seeing on the battlefield today? We're seeing U.S. troops attacked in Iraq and Syria by drones. And Iran says it's not us, right? We see all these proxy attacks on Israel, and Iran says it's not us. And maybe they have plausible deniability on the world stage, even though you and I know they're the ones behind these attacks. But it says drones are expensive to produce and easy to deploy. They can mimic flocks of birds and even evade radar. Because they blend into the environment, they can appear out of nowhere, surprising the enemy. They present a new threat, and most conventional armies are unprepared to defend against them, as we saw in Israel, and why they're jerry-rigging these cope cages over top of their tanks to try to protect against this. Still don't see the threat. Imagine this. It's Inauguration Day. As the new president prepares to speak, an assassin launches a fleet of drones from just a few hundred yards away. The swarm contains several hundred drones, each the size of a small bird. Each one carries an explosive. They converge on the president. How do you protect the president? Conventional defenses don't work. You can't tackle a drone. I mean, you could, but there's hundreds of them. You're not going to tackle all of them. Firearms might take out a few, but not an entire swarm. So you have to develop new defenses. You probably have to put the president in a protective bubble that can't be penetrated by drones. On August 4, 2018, a similar scenario to this took place in Venezuela. As President Maduro addressed a crowd at a military parade, 2 drones exploded nearby, prompting security to surround him with blast shields. The explosions caused no harm to Maduro, and many believe he orchestrated the entire event so he could crack down on political opponents. But whether it was real or staged, the attack shows a new danger people need to protect against. And it's not just assassins who will look to use drones. With such technology, terrorists could take destruction to new heights. Imagine this, it's Super Bowl Sunday. 100,000 fans crowd into a stadium to watch the excitement. And this doesn't have to be the Super Bowl. It could be any stadium. Think of all the soccer stadiums in the world, all the college football stadiums, all the sports stadiums that can fill with 100,000 or more people. But before the first score, a flock of thousands of drones descend on the stadium. They hover above the crowd and release chemical weapons on those below. Everyone dies. And unless every point of entry is secured, even an indoor stadium is vulnerable to such an attack. And again, even if you have a totally enclosed arena, if there's a weak point, such as a window, the first drone can land on it, explode, the window's gone, and all the rest of the drones go in. Guys, this is a huge vulnerability, an entirely new way of conducting warfare and terrorism that the world is not prepared for. It says drone attacks are more than just a novel way to assassinate or a new method to unleash terrorism. Swarming drones are the future of warfare, and they're coming sooner than most people think. Drone swarms using artificial intelligence offer a number of benefits and advantages to nation states. They're less expensive to build and maintain than large standing armies. They don't require large numbers of highly trained personnel, and especially highly trained personnel that's vulnerable on the front lines. You can operate these drones from anywhere in the world. They can be controlled from a remote, secure location. They can be deployed anywhere in the world, often undetected. This means they magnify the military capabilities of smaller nations. They close the gap between weaker nations and world superpowers. Imagine conventional forces trying to counter an attacking swarm of drones. Tanks, armored personnel carriers, and infantry advance on the battlefield. From the sky, a swarm of millions of drones the size of bees descend on the conventional army. They cover every tank, vehicle, and piece of equipment. In minutes, they quickly disable the entire army, leaving them defenseless. Firearms, artillery shells, and missiles have little impact on a swarm. Think of a swarm of locusts descending on a field. A farmer can fire a shotgun and swat at them all he wants, but in mere minutes they'll devour all his crops. Drone warfare will bring the same impact to the battlefield. Certainly, military forces will develop new weapons and defensive measures to counter such attacks, as we're seeing with these cope cages in Israel, but these too will be vulnerable to a surprise attack. However, no matter what new techniques are developed, you can be sure of one thing. The next great war will be far different from the last one. The first nation to develop these new weapons will have a decisive advantage. And that's why you can be sure the world's governments are racing to develop them. So what does all this mean? Well, the rise of artificial intelligence and drone swarms is a destabilizing event. Together, these new technologies will overturn the post-war stability of mutual assured destruction. Once this happens, World War III will break out. Maybe it'll be World War IV, who knows, the rate we're going. When the dust settles, one nation or a group of nations will dominate the globe. That nation or nations will be the leader in the development of these new military technologies. Does this surprise you? Well, it shouldn't. The Bible says another world war is in our future, Revelation 6:4. It also tells us what the world will look like when that war ends. One nation will control the earth, Revelation 13:7. Is this just a coincidence? No, it's yet another sign we're on the verge of the tribulation, the second coming of Jesus Christ. This means you should take advantage of every opportunity you have to spread the gospel and tell others about the love of Jesus. Time is short. He's coming soon. Guys, everything has changed on the battlefield. That should be very clear to anyone watching right now, and bigger changes coming. We've talked about the United States and the Replicator Initiative and how they're pushing to have hundreds and thousands of drones deployed simultaneously, land, sea, and air, within the next 18 to 24 months. That's their goal. Beyond that time horizon, we're looking at the deployment of millions simultaneously, and then billions simultaneously, and then trillions simultaneously. Whoever develops the manufacturing technologies that enables them to do that will rule the world. No doubt about it. We're seeing all of these things fall in place. We're seeing the stage set for the very things that the Bible talks about for the end times. And I would point out, with the current conflict in the Middle East, we've seen some of these older school technologies sent over to the area, over to the Middle East by the United States. I hope they know what they're doing. 2 carrier groups have been sent over there. In an age of drones and hypersonic missiles, those carriers are more vulnerable than they've been since World War II. And I hope that we don't see one of those carriers lost in this conflict because we're trying to fight the last war and we're complacent and unprepared. But guys, we're seeing these bases, military bases set up by the US in Syria and Iraq that are sitting ducks for these drone attacks. And they've been attacked constantly over the last 3 weeks. Why we would put ourselves in that situation, I have no idea. Because maybe we've talked in the past about why is the United States absent in the end times? Why is the United States not a superpower? Why does the United States not come to Israel's aid in Ezekiel 38:39? And we've talked about, well, there's many possibilities. The rapture is one, and economic collapse is another. What about the defeat of the U.S. military that everybody thinks is inconceivable because, well, they're superior, they're the greatest ever? And what about the complacency that ensues when you're trying to fight the last war and your technology can't keep up? What happens if a carrier group is lost right now, financially, in terms of on the world stage, the deterrent effect that the United States has once the United States is exposed as invulnerable? And I would say that happened when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan and left everybody behind, and the Taliban won, guys. There's no other way to put it than the Taliban won. The United States went into Afghanistan, said, we are coming in, we are going to remove those who harbor terrorists. The Taliban will be gone. And some of the exact same people who were in leadership roles in 2001 in Afghanistan with the Taliban harboring terrorists moved right back into place 20 years later. And today, the Taliban rules Afghanistan. So who won the war? And what message did that send to the world? Well, the United States is weak. They'll back down. The United States isn't a trusted partner. And now we're seeing the United States overly reliant on obsolete technology. Very expensive technology, no doubt about it. But is it still relevant on the battlefield, and can it easily be defeated by less expensive weapons that its enemies are developing at a rapid pace? So the world has changed, guys. Everything has changed. And we're going to be seeing more and more and more of a shift toward swarms of drones, smaller drones, more powerful drones, drones that do different things, drones that learn on the battlefield, until the battlefield is entirely composed of drones fighting wars. And again, one nation will develop the manufacturing capability to scale up quickly in this area and will conquer the world. And when that happens, we will see fulfillment of end times Bible prophecy. I believe that will mark a point. It will be very clear what times we live in at that point. I don't plan to be here because I believe the rapture of the church will occur before the tribulation period, and that's an event we'll see in the tribulation. But guys, it's coming, and we are so close to it, and most people are completely unaware because they're complacent. They think, as things have been in the past, so they will be tomorrow. But history teaches us over and over and over again that that is not the case. And that failure to adapt, that complacency, will ultimately be the undoing of those who aren't paying attention. So guys, leave your comments below. What do you think about all of this? Let me know. But I think that it clearly indicates the times in which we live. We see all the signs Jesus and the prophets said to look for, and Jesus said, when you see those signs, know my return is right at the door. I'm right at the door. Look up, your salvation draws near. So guys, take advantage of every moment we have left to tell a lost and dying world about the hope that you have in Jesus Christ. So let me know what you think below. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. God willing, I will see you on Friday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.